It is so fun to be seeing the pandemic come to an end and people are coming out, and we're sitting here in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona, with Ivoclar's Dental Innovation Tour, making people smile again. And after a year of Zoom meetings and everybody locked up in their house, and to have meetings coming back, it's so fun and exciting. It's just an honor to be podcasting live with a real person and not seeing you, Don. This is Don Bell, who's been at Ivoclar 20 years, and Priscilla Esparza, who's been here in Arizona, where we're at, for 8 years. I've been here practicing here 32 years, since 87. And my gosh, is it exciting that we're finally out meeting people, and it's like dentistry's back.
Yeah, it's a way to reconnect. And I think the tour started with the intent of trying to reconnect with customers in the field, dealer partners, dental customers, labs. And it's been great. The tour started April 17th in Dallas. And we went Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, and now here to Phoenix. And it's been great to see people live. I know we're, COVID protocol, so we're social distance or with masks, but we're seeing people live. We get to actually have a conversation. You get to kind of elbow bump. You get to do some normal stuff that seems more personal than Zoom calls, which has really been the case for the last, 12, 15 months of activity. So yeah, we're excited as well.
It seems like from all accounts that dentistry's back. I mean, I've got my 2 vaccines. You've been vaccinated. Everybody I know in Arizona has already had both of their vaccines. And the patients, all that pent-up demand, they're coming back, and everyone's busy. And my God, it came back like a vengeance. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I think in general, I'll go back to a personal experience because I think that's a good kickoff point. I saw my dentist in Illinois right after they reopened. So it was March or May of last year. And they had set really strict protocols, how they let patients in, how they managed their staff with PPE. Phenomenal job. And I think the industry in general has done a phenomenal job with setting protocols for patients, which means I'm a patient, I feel confident that I'm going to be protected going to your office for treatment. So whether I have a care that let's say I have a crown or I have a tooth that's cracked that I need to get done, or I'm looking at care, I feel really confident that my provider, my dentist, has done a really good job with setting protocols. And they've done a really good job with communication in general to their patients. And I think it's created a confidence level of it's safe. They're going to treat me well. I'm going to be protected. And I'm not worried about being, part of any type of spread of the disease. I think that's a really important fact. I think there's been no tracing of any case, as far as I know, of a COVID case through a dental practice. That may or may not be 100% true, but it's probably generally accurate, because I think our industry's done a really good job setting protocols. And I think that's allowed patients to feel like, okay, I'm safe, and I'm safe to come in, and people are coming back because of that.
Well, what a difference a year makes. I mean, it was a year ago. It was a completely different atmosphere, the unknown. And my favorite Dentistry Uncensored podcast was under you guys' leadership. You guys, you got the 6 biggest names that could deal with this, from Gordon Christian to Rella. And my gosh, talk about a leadership role. That was a time when the dentist needed to hear what Gordon Christian was thinking, and Rella, and you guys arranged it all and really set the stage that we're going to get through this. And now it's a year later and we're through it. And, it's just, wow, what a wild year that was. So now that that's behind us, everything looks better. My gosh, what are you most excited about now that we're all coming back to life? They're got a year's worth of dental demands. They're booked out in the offices, and everyone's really busy. What is the most exciting thing that you think Ivoclar is going to be doing post-pandemic now?
That's a good question. So we've been very focused on trying, before the pandemic and really leading up to it, of developing efficiency in workflows, whether it be, let's say, direct restorative or connecting to a lab or processing dentures, whatever. And chairside milling is a big part of that. Everything's become a process we've tried to refine, and that was going on even through the pandemic. So now as we go to market, we think practices are opening, labs have been back up and running really at a high level. We're just trying to help customers be more effective, more efficient, and more successful and deliver great aesthetics. And I think we've been developing these for several years, and now everyone gets to see it. And that was the other part of really the tour, reconnect with customers and have people see what's available from us and what direction we're heading in as far as developing solutions for their businesses. And I think we want practices to be successful. We want to treat people and the practices well, make sure everyone's protected, obviously, and then what they deliver in care is really, really good and high quality.
You know, it's one thing to listen to everybody's thoughts and views and opinions, but I'm a data-driven guy. I just love the data. And women always bought 99% of all the makeup and all the cosmetic, pantyhose, everything. And this pandemic, like as a guy, I grew up with 5 sisters. Before they could go to school, they had to stand in front of a mirror for an hour. And I used to think, God, that must be awful. I just went in there and went to the bathroom. That was my deal. But but men now, including myself, I mean, I don't even look in the mirror when I'm brushing my teeth and flossing. I don't need a mirror to floss. I mean, are you no imagination? But the men looking at themselves on Zoom conferences, you saw like 100% spike just in men buying makeup. And everything I'm reading is, I think the cosmetic revolution, which basically you guys kicked off. You got to, I lived through the cosmetic revolution, which came from the organic chemistry revolution of adhesive dentistry that set the stage for the bonding. But really, it was a lot of, like, even who's on your van? Is it a short, fat, bald guy like me? No, it's a pretty woman. But I think we're going to see a new revolution in men looking at their Zoom call saying, God, I need to get something done with these teeth. I mean, and you're seeing it in the numbers. It's a real thing.
I think I would agree with that. I think what you end up seeing is, think about what happened when the pandemic hit. People were at home, and what did they see every day? They saw themselves, their spouse, and they saw their home. And you didn't have much that you could control other than, what do I want to change, right? What do I change? I don't like my appearance. Maybe I look heavy. Maybe I want to change my hair. I want to change something in my home. That was pretty common. I think you saw like home renovations or improvements go up. I think I agree. Cosmetic dentistry became, I don't like the way I look. I don't like my smile. I don't like something about where I'm at today. I want to change it, because you're seeing yourself every day and you're really hyper aware of it. I think that's 100% true.
It affected me too. I when the pandemic kicked off and you're at home, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, you got to gain 20 pounds. You look like you're just going to shrivel up and die. And I committed to eating and snacking more all through the pandemic just to put some weight on.
So this is the way I looked all through the pandemic. Suit on, shave. No, I think the funny part about it is we all kind of adapted to the new environment. We weren't going into offices. We were working from home. We were on Zoom calls, which we had to either be on visually or not. And, you know, that's just what we all adapted to. But I think now as you get back out, I think there's a desire just for human interaction, and also a pride in appearance and how we look and feel about each other. I don't think that's uncommon at all.
If I go back and look at the Industrial Revolution, it kicks off in about 1850 in England with the combustion engine, but it was so big and clunky, you could just pump water out of flooded coal mines. But everything always gets faster, easier, higher quality, lower price, and smaller. And when it got smaller, they put them on ships, and that was shipping. And then when it got to New York, where you're at, on the Erie Canal up in Amherst and Buffalo, in the Erie Canal, through that town. And that's what kicked it off, because if everybody on the world, of all 8 billion people, all their productivity is they make one sandwich a day, well, the only way you would double the wealth of the whole planet is to get everybody to make 2 sandwiches a day. And that was by the adoption of technology. And even when you go into accounting, I mean, the number one cost in dentistry, the ADA says the overhead 65%. That means the dentist costs 35%. The staff costs another 25%. So 55% is just on people. What technologies or around the corner? We keep hearing so much, about printing and milling and all these technologies. What technologies do you think is going to take that farmer plowing a field behind an oxen to driving a John Deere tractor and having these big gains?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think to kind of look at maybe in segments or pieces. So in simple terms, without adding a lot of technology, but focusing on material technology, we've tried to take a lot of our direct restorative systems for placing everyday composites and taking that system and making it faster, more efficient, but also very aesthetic. So I can get as good a result as if I do multi-layered steps of composite placement with a power fill system, which I can fill 4 millimeters with, but still get a really great aesthetic result. Like something simple like that can increase
bulk
throughput through an
fill.
office. Yeah.
But you're limiting bulk fill to 4 millimeters? Is that,
Yeah, our materials are flexible in terms of how they work, but we also want to try to make sure that we get a thorough cure all the way through the material, for simple reasons that if you don't cure all the way through, you're going to get sensitivity and probably secondary decay. So something as simple as streamlining a workflow of direct restoratives, while it doesn't seem like a lot, if I can go from prep to put down bonding agent, fill, cure, get a really quality aesthetic result, and be more efficient, that's a big step for many practices. And then you start getting into what can I do digitally and create an office restorations with, or work with my lab on creating. Our chairside system now, our mill, to your point, our mill got very small. It's very compact and it's very efficient. And if it's in any dental practice, it's a self-contained system, but I can mill out an Emax crown in 20 minutes chairside and it's a beautiful restoration. So I think those are a couple clinical applications. And then what's the wow I think that we look at too from a laboratory perspective? We make a denture now, a removable device with no teeth. So there's no carded teeth anymore. It's a puck of material that we mill, and you got a chance to see this. It's amazing to see the quality and the detail and the aesthetics of something that's milled on a machine and polished that fits virtually perfect with no adjustments required. And I think when you think about a patient that's come back in, and you would know, that has removable apparatus, you have it done once and it's up. I have a hot spot. I need to realign. I need to do this. The technology allows you to get a better result so the patient has no adjustments. So I'm a clinician, I want to do that now because I know I'm going to get a quality result, but my patient sees a benefit of, wow, I'm not coming back to my practice and having to get adjustments made. My denture fits so well. Those are things to me that improve. Maybe some are practice and production related and some are patient related about, I'm still getting great aesthetics. I'm just getting them faster and more efficiently through my practice.
You know, I always cringe a little bit. You see so much messaging about all on four, and the biggest leader like Clear Choice, the biggest person that added, we'll add the surgeon to the prosthodontist to the lab man. 1 + 1 + 1 = 5. It's been bought and sold several times, and now Aspen finally bought it. But my gosh, the last time I saw their numbers, they were only doing like 18,000 arches a year in a country with 330 million people, and the denture, the all on none, is 100 times,
yes,
if not 1,000 times, a scale of not from 1 to 10 to 100, but to 1,000. It's scale more important. And I wish that my dental homies would be as passionate about the all on none as the all on four. I mean, yeah, it's great. Let's make a Mercedes-Benz for that person that's got 25,000 an arch, but that's 50,000 for the full mouth. I guarantee you for everyone that's got 50,000, there's a gazillion that have 1,000. I'd rather own McDonald's than Ruth's Chris. But I want to ask you about the curing. It's so amazing how you can make this world-class product, because I've been to Liechtenstein. I've gone there when I'm going to that meeting in Cologne, and I've never seen so many PhD organic chemists in white coats that if you ask them a question, they could take you to a grease board and just melt your brain. I mean, unbelievable. But then the whole thing falls apart because Doc doesn't know his curing light quit working. And you got to ask your homies, when's the last time you checked your curing light to see if it even cures 4 millimeters? And so many of these sensitivity studies, I mean, how many times have you gone into an office, Priscilla, in the last 8 years in Arizona? And he's asking about, well, I'm getting sensitive in my composite. And you're like, yeah, but your curing light doesn't even work.
Right. You have a great point. And just to kind of piggyback on Don, Ivoclar Vivadent has done an exceptional job at providing these very efficient workflows, whether it's our direct, indirect, or the technology that's coming out. I have never sold so many curing lights in all my years with Ivoclar than the COVID year. And that is because doctors were looking at ways to be more efficient and ensure that they weren't doing redos, debond, sensitivity. Like, they want to streamline their direct workflow, just especially these CAD/CAM offices that are already implementing same-day dentistry. Those were the ones that were really excited because, as we know, those direct composite MODs that take quite a bit of time in the chair aren't the most productive procedures to do. So being an assistant for 18 years, layering composite, beep, layering another composite, beep. So when they were short staffed or short on rooms and space, they really were excited about having a solution for their direct workflow. And, they want to see that value brought into the office. With our blue phase technology, it is ensuring that they are curing 100% of these materials within that time frame and that output. And what I've heard from them is, when I was an assistant, I had no idea what the curing light was doing or what it should be doing. So to answer your question in terms of when was the last time you checked your lights, it goes anywhere from 2 years to 10 years. We've never checked our lights. Well, are you getting any post-op? Not really. But then the assistant's behind the doctor nodding her head, yes, we're getting a ton of post-op. So really, I feel like Ivoclar's done a phenomenal job of really training and equipping all of the sales reps out there to go into the offices and really not just test lights, but to kind of talk to them a little bit about what broad spectrum is, why it's important. Are you having any debonds? What are you using in your office in terms of cementation? Because, I've been in offices where they're bonding zirconia and it keeps popping off. Well, I'm like, Doc, do you know the workflow for zirconia is a different prep guideline, and you should be able to use a conventional cement if it's true zirconia. So again, I feel like our curing light technology is the best that's out there. And I tell doctors, do you want to just have confidence in every procedure you do in your office and know that if you do have something come up and there's post-op or there's a debond, that it's not your curing light that's the issue? Now you got to go back to the instructions for use and see if you're using the material the way that it should be used. So I, for one, can tell you that I've had really great feedback from doctors regarding let's get better lights so that I can be more efficient and I can, deliver better service and treatment for my patients. So the direct restorative with the power cure light that we have now has 3 different modes in one light.
And what's the name of that one?
It's called our power cure light. It's a blue phase light, but it's 3 modes. So if you're close to the pulp or you're on a class 5 near the tissue, you don't want to blast it on the turbo mode. So you can adjust that output, which is really unique to our lights. In addition to that, it's one of the only lights that has that extra battery on all of our charging stations. So if you're ever in the middle of a procedure and it goes out, you're not waiting to order another battery. I just love that there's a tacking cure cycle now. A lot of doctors do their own wave tacking. This is like precise. So it drops the output to 950 and then you're able to get that perfect removal of cement. So really, I see not just the doctors excited, I see the assistants excited. They're like, you're telling me that we can do an MOD in half the time. I'm like, yes.
Well, you know what would excite the assistants the most? I mean, when, this pandemic, we've learned that, we haven't documented one case of a patient catching COVID. Mm-hmm. But you've documented several that when the autoclave stopped working and they got sick. And just like the doc hasn't checked his curing light, he hasn't checked his autoclave. Mm-hmm. And my gosh, there's been some big cases of some of the greatest dentists you've ever met in your life who just had a horrendous experience not knowing his autoclave quit working 6 months ago. But the thing that with the PPE costs so high mm-hmm. and so hard to catch, you see in every dental office in the middle of a procedure, it switches from one procedure to another. Now they're doing a filling and we need that curing light. Mm-hmm. So she's taking off everything, leaving the room. And, what Southwest Airlines showed the most was we're only going to fly a 737 Boeing. Every mechanic can fix it. We have full parts for it. And their costs were so much lower. And what dentists have to realize that by the time the dentist takes 35%, the staff 25%, 55% of all your money goes to people, which is the same what we see in the publicly traded markets, 55%. When you buy something for $1, 55 cents of that dollar went to people. That you can't have 4 operatories and people running around getting a light. Yeah. Yeah. And what I did in my office, luckily for me, the first time I read Herb Kelleher's book, the founder of Southwest, who died the first month of last year, was that every operatory is the same. Mm-hmm. And if you have to get up and leave the room, because I switched from a cleaning to a filling to a crown to a root canal. Well, I mean, imagine being on a Southwest Airlines flight and halfway to San Diego says, oh my God, we're certainly wishing we would have had an extra engine on our plane. I mean, so just setting up those opportunities when you know your cost, and the only secret to lower prices is lower cost. So lower prices, the PPOs are setting your prices. So you got to get under that to have your margin. And so they always skimp. Like, how much is this light cost?
It retails for $1965.
Okay, $1,965.
Yes.
Doc, what was your payroll last month? Just what's payroll for one? They always got a gazillion dollars for payroll every month. And then you say, well, can we get this little $2,000 thing so that our huge labor isn't running all around? And the one that annoys me the most is they're in hygiene checks. Same day dentistry is the most important thing.
Huge.
So I'm checking Priscilla, and every time I met her, she's eating gummy bears and drinking chocolate. And you have a cavity and you're busy. And I say, you want to do it today? And the first thing the hygienist says, well, you can't do it in my room. You're going to have to go move and set up. And it's like, why? Why can't we do that? Well, my room doesn't have a high speed, and my room's missing like 3 things.
Very territorial.
So this Southwest Airlines plane can't take off. And I'm like, no, you go to the other room. And my gosh.
I mean, you're talking efficiency. The Power Cure system is cutting your posterior composites in half the time, and you're doing an extra composite. You know, not to mention the fact that Ivoclar's really thought about the cavifills. We're loading them a little bit more than most of our competitors. How many times do you go do a composite and you just need a little bit more in there, right? So they're really trying to find solutions that are everyday solutions for not just the dentist. I mean, I was an assistant for 18 years and I followed his direction, but at the same time, I got excited when we'd go to CE or we'd learn something new. And so that's why I feel like the education that we're able to provide is really valuable, because we're trying to get them to be more efficient without compromising quality of the product, you know? And
you know, the most mind-blowing article we ever ran on Dental Town going back 2 decades ago, there was this operations and logistics genius named Scott Perkins out of Houston's, and now he's in El Paso. And all the endodontists think, you know, it takes an hour to do a molar root canal. And he just went in there and measured the time of by only saving the cost of 1 slow speed. You got to change the 15 file, the 20, the 25, the 30. And Scott started a system where he said, well, my cost isn't these endo files. So he had 5, and the assistant set up, you know, 15, 20, 25, 30. And he cut his molar root canal down to 15 minutes. We filmed it, we published it. The endodontists went insane that this guy has no care about quality, because they never realized they were spending 20 minutes just changing these little files to save the cost of only having to have 1 slow speed deal. And the slow speed's not your cost. The operatory is not even your cost. When you look at net income for dentists, a lot of dentists say, well, yeah, the specialists like endodontists and oral surgeons make so much money. Okay, that's one way to correlate it, especially, but having 2 emergency room operatories that are never scheduled. You go into any dental office, I just broke my tooth, I have a cavity, and they're looking for an operatory. Operatories aren't your cost. And endodontists and oral surgeons, since they get all their money from referrals, and about 8 referrals give them about 80% of all their business, and then all the other ones are 20%, one of their referrals calls up and says, my patient, Don Bell, is there any way you can see him? He's got a toothache. That endodontist doesn't want to say, I don't have a chair, call another endodontist and I'll lose 1/8 of my business. The endodontists and oral surgeons all have extra emergency rooms. It's the most important room. So same day dentistry, they got a cavity, get that curing light in the hygiene room. Let's do it now. The hygienist can start our next patient in an emergency room or somewhere else. So know your cost and use technology to get more productivity out of your highest cost labor. It'd be like not doing any of that, but putting solar panels on your roof to get off the grid. Okay, you know, one makes much more sense than the other.
And to tag on to that too, think about the patient for a situation, especially now. Let's say, as I said earlier, I'm comfortable with, you have protocols in place to manage, so I'm not going to get COVID, I'm not going to get infected while I visit you. However, I probably still also know that if I can get treated right away and not have to come back, I'm better off. Whether it's for that reason or, you know, we're going back to work, I'm back to normal hours, I really can't take time off. That really is critical right now too. So being able to treat on site efficiently and productivity and same day really becomes, I think, critical, especially now. I think whenever there's a crisis where there's been situations, whether financial, in this case a pandemic, where things dramatically change, it really becomes, how do I treat a patient quicker because they may not have time or the ability to come back? In this case, there's probably varying factors, but that's a big part of it. I want to be efficient. I want to get you in the chair and be treated.
I'm the worst patient. I go in and they're like, we're not going to see you again. We took an impression for a night guard, and I go, can you send it to me? And I'm in dentistry, and
I have to admit, I'm the opposite.
Here,
so like,
Priscilla, are you high maintenance?
I am the opposite.
Let's not ask who treats me, but I got to tell you, like, doctors
I get what you're saying, though. Yeah, right.
But we got to get some metrics, because when I first got to this town, I was. In 87, I was demoralized because I came from Kansas City, and the pedo department, you couldn't even hardly get your requirements. There was almost nothing. Moved to Arizona, they didn't have fluoride in the water, and I just demoralizing. And when we started that Arizona Citizens for Better Dental Health, we got it fluoridated, but you had to look at the DMFT numbers. I mean, one of the specialties, it's not just oral surgeons and endodontists. One of them is the public health dentist, and they have measurements, disease, missing, and filled teeth. So dentistry is either just a farce, it's a complete joke, and it just needs to be ended, or it's real. And if it's real, you should be able to measure the DMFT. And on same day treatment, I mean, you have a disease, and if they wait a year, the disease grows into more disease. If they're inconvenienced, they don't come back, you didn't treat the disease. And so many times the dentist looks in the mirror and judges their value by how many alphabet letters they have behind their name. I got my FAGD, MAG, whatever. I look at treatment plan acceptance. I got my 4 boys are now independent, and they had 6 grandkids. If my grandkids went to Don and he could only convince 3 of the 6 to get their come back later and get their filling, and they went to you and you did same day dentistry and you fixed all 6 there, I would mathematically prove that you are twice as good of a dentist as you. Yeah. And he's going to say, but I went to Boston, I went to Tufts, I have my MAGD. I don't care. Yeah. I mean, and as far as the composite material, I mean, my gosh, just if you removed all the decay and filled it with butter would be better than not doing same-day dentistry. Yeah. So if you can't do same-day dentistry with Ivoclar, do it with butter, and you'll be a better dentist than reappointing them and not using butter or Ivoclar on any filling.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's I think what we've seen, and we tried to do this before when the pandemic hit too, is get our team prepared for when things come back, because we knew they would reopen. How to talk to your offices, how to engage with your practices. They're going to want to build up and increase productivity. They're dealing with PPE requirements and what they can do. Their throughput is down. How can we help? And it's really step one is trying to help the practices be more effective at just generating production.
But it's going to change the whole model because
it can, yes,
it used to be numb you up, see the crown, do a hygiene check, prep, and let others pack. I mean, and now it's like, but when you suit up to go do a moonwalk, you're just going to do everything on your moonwalk. Yeah, and that's why I don't want to move him from hygiene room to another room. I don't want him to come back. You're here, you're right now. And it makes you wonder, is this going to be the rebirth of CAD-CAM? Because in all fairness, when Röntgen figured out the radiograph machine, it rolled across all the dental office. The adoption rate eventually was 100%. When practice management software came out, the same adoption rate. Digital x-rays, the same adoption rate. But CAD-CAM, it came out, Guns N' Roses, and about 15%. But it was during the pandemic where my friends right here in this town were saying, my gosh, I did a toothache. My assistant met me, and I just wanted to do the root canal, build up crown, Cerax cement, all done. She paid $2,500 on her visa. I saw one person. It was twice as profitable. It was one visit. I think it'll be interesting to see how this pandemic changes our workflow moving forward.
I would agree, and I think this becomes, maybe it's a permanent change in terms of ideas. So this is a paradigm shift for everybody. We adapted to incredible circumstances, but now it becomes, how do I become more efficient? How do I treat my patients more efficiently and more productively, and create a better experience? So same day dentistry, whether you're doing direct composite or you do a crown, I think for sure becomes, I want to pursue this because I know I'm going to provide a better service to my patient, minimize chair time, but also I'm going to be more productive and I'm going to be able to be more flexible, to your point, about how to service patients. And I think another thing that happened, I had read this a while back, sometime at the end of last year. In the course of 2020, a couple things really took off well. The demand for aligners went up again, people saw themselves in the mirror and
Mhm.
said, I don't like my smile. What can I change? Straighter, whiter. And the aligners went up. And I think scanning in general, just scanning initially, went up quite a bit last year, because I think a lot of offices said, hey, wait a minute, I'm taking VPS, I'm putting it in a bag, I'm sending it to my lab.
There
Is
were
this
a
really
lot
what
of
we want to be doing
challenges
right
with
now,
that.
working with my lab on transferring of information? Or do I take a digital impression and send a file? Make sure the lab receives it, they accept the file, make any tweaks if necessary, then receive it and do the case, because now I've eliminated potential risk for everybody involved, but also it's better. I get a better image visually. I bring it in, I design off it, I mill out a restoration that's a better quality restoration, that's monolithic, it's a great fit. And if I need to make adjustments, I make them before I actually go in that process. So I think it's accelerated the productivity side, and also re-looking at all the processes and saying, why am I still doing impressions, or why am I still doing certain things? I just hope as things continue to reopen, we move that way instead of going back. Like, you can get comfortable. I think we all get a little comfortable in habits. Like, oh, it's back to normal, I don't have to really do this anymore. I don't know what normal is. Like, did anybody foresee COVID coming? Is there probably going to be another virus that, becomes an issue somewhere down the road?
I saw the virus
I
coming,
agree.
but I wear loops, so I could
You
I
could see it.
that little,
Great
I see little
magnification.
spikes coming out.
But you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's somewhat preparing for the unexpected, and the technology that's available today allows you the ability to be more productive in a great environment. In a perfect maybe environment, you can be really productive and serve your patients. And when things get tight and your business is run well, you can thrive in a situation where others can't. And I think was probably a difficult challenge for a lot of companies in 2020, was if you're not run well and can adapt to the circumstances, you're really going to struggle or not survive a situation like that.
I agree. I mean, doctors really loved having control when it was shut down for a couple months, at least here in Arizona,
Yep.
and they had CAD CAM or they had a scanner. They're like, I wasn't taking an impression that may, putting somebody at risk with COVID, or, taking that to the lab, or a driver picking it up and worrying about how that's being, transported. So they're like, I'd scan something and I kept moving. I kept working.
Well, what I did during the pandemic is, because of COVID, when I took a quadrant of Improgum, I would pull the bloody cotton roll out of the
did you?
Improgum before I signed. I thought, because of
was
COVID,
really
at
nice
least
of
pull
you.
out the bloody cotton roll. But and it's starting a lot of new business models, because I've done a show like this from many labs over the years, and they tell me that their remakes on a scan is 1%,
Wow.
and on impression material it's 6%. And
Mhm.
again, in these data-driven labs where they can show you years worth of data, it may be an inconvenient fact to your belief, but the data is the data. It's just higher quality. And then some people did CAD CAM at the beginning and to chairside mill, and now they're finding out that what they like the most about their Cerac machine is the scanner.
Mhm.
But now they're sending that scan to a lab down the street where they're milling it out and making
Absolutely.
it. So the patient's still in the chair, but if the whole appointment's in the chair and I numb, prep, scan, mill, seat, I know all the lecture gurus can all do it in an hour, but I'm a short, fat, bald guy, and people that look like me, it's closer to 3 hours. But by sending it to the lab in their own town,
Mhm.
like an hour later, the lab guy pulls up and here's a crown, and there's like, well, how did that happen? Well, it's pretty obvious. Your assistant's made 100 crowns in her life,
Mhm.
and your lab man's made 10,000 a decade, and he's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
in his third decade of his lab. So I think the business model of chairside milling, it might be, we're gonna just use the milling machine for an emergency when we need to do it during a pandemic, after hours, weekends. But man, during the day, if a whole lab can get this scan and whip it out and drive it right back, the appointment's 3 hours, and the number one guru on earth is Samir Puri right here in this town. If he's at an hour and he's tall, dark, and handsome, and all the short, fat, bald ones are at 3 hours,
Mhm.
that 3 hour can get much closer to Samir
Yep.
in productivity and time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we had discussions with labs too along the course of last year as well. Similar discussions. Offices that sent scans in, they saw an uptick in digital files coming in. And they, in general, labs will accept STL files from different scanners from dentists and kind of triage the case and determine the quality of the STL and the prep. And then they move it into production from that point. And they saw an uptick in both things in terms of overall volume and how they were translating the cases. And I think there's a real efficiency to that. And I go back to your point. I may send it to my lab, like our little mill, as a chairside lab. We have in my practice for single units. Maybe you walk in as a case and you have a cracked tooth. I see it. Hey, I can treat you right away. Do you want to schedule it? Sure. Right. 3-unit case or maybe multi-unit case. I say, you know what? I'm going to scan it. I'm going to prep it. I'm going to send it to my lab and have it finished. And I think I think the model, that hybrid model of how do I use the technology that best suits the practice is most important. There's no right or wrong way to use it. It's really about what works in your office, what works in yours, and finding and having flexibility to either mill it to your lab down the hall or send it to your lab that's 30 miles across town. It really doesn't matter. It just gives you more flexibility to accomplish that.
We've been talking a lot about pretty girls and their smiles, but I want to go back to where I started, that poor all-on-none grandpa. You know, he's not the sexy all-on-4. He don't have 50 grand. He doesn't look like that. But is this going to change the workflow of a denture? Because dentures have been 5 appointments to do this at a week apart.
You see a denture appointment, you're like, is that a full denture or partial?
And nobody wants to wait 5 appointments over 5 weeks to get anything. I don't think I'd buy a car if I had to go 5 times to the dealer. Do you think this technology in the digital era of dentures is going to change the workflow, make it faster, more efficient?
Yeah, I think there's a couple parts of it too. There's the prep work of it, of actually taking all the data that you have to do for the actual denture itself. And then I'll say post-insertion. Up front, we can have workflows that are really efficient. You still need to take really quality impressions and digitize them. So getting the impression under compression is probably the single biggest challenge still. So beyond that, maybe it's 3 or 4 appointments up front of capturing all the data, digitizing it yourself, sending it to your lab. They bring in the files and start developing the denture themselves, not on all-on-4s, but just a traditional denture, producing it, milling it, sending it back to you finished with fits that minimize post-insertion down to maybe 1 visit, sometimes not at all. And I heard this is a great example in Houston. We have a doctor that does a lot of dentures, and he was using our denture system prior, switched to Ivoclar. And we were talking about the fits and what he loves about the fits. And he goes, my patients never come back for adjustments. And he goes, let me give you an example. Older couple, I think they were in their 90s. I think he damaged his denture or maybe lost it. I can't remember which part, but it was non-usable. He had a file of it because he had done the original one with our system before Ivoclar, the 1-disc solution. And he said, don't worry about it. He got the phone call from the patient on like Monday morning at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. He took out a disc, milled the denture, finished it. I think they came by either later that day or the next morning, drove by because this was like March or April or May of last year, whenever it was, and delivered it curbside. Curbside pickup, patient tried it in the car because they were, I mean, at that point you're dealing with, are you vaccinated? Who's what? It was an awkward situation, but used it. This is great. Fit was perfect. Didn't have to realign it and just took off and went home, and he was on his way in a very short turnaround. That to me becomes game changing for doctor providing service and for a patient or your parents or my parents that need dentures, that they have access to that almost right away. I think that's the part that really changes what happens in the industry.
And one of the messages that I think knowledge doesn't have any value if it's not transferable. If you take it to the grave with your invention, it means nothing. But next month we have 6,000 new dentists coming out in Arizona. We got an AT Still in Mesa and Midwestern, and I hope they remember their history. That like implantology, the great late implantologist Carl Misch started out as a denture-making prosthodontist, and the only reason he got into implants is because he was so frustrated that they do an all-on-4 and the implant would break, and of course they would blame it on the implant, just like when the crown doesn't fit, it's always the lab. And Carl's like, well, of course it broke. I mean, you didn't get the bite right. You got nothing right on the denture, and now it broke. But when after I got my fellowship in the Misch Institute, my diplomat in implantology and MAGD and all that stuff, now 30 years later, 3 decades later, I know I look 80, but I'm only 58. Is that the ones who were young and cosmetic and got into implants, doing the single teeth and everything, They stopped at like the 1 million, 1.5 million. I didn't even see any of them get to 2, but the ones who came back and focused on the basics first of full mouth dentures, and instead of just advertising implants for whatever and showing the implant case, maintains the focus on the big foundation of the pyramid, the dentures. And then if you get 100 denture patients, well, 50% of them are just going to get the cheapest one, the lowest cost. But then the next 25% want to upgrade to Ivoclar more cosmetic teeth. And then another segment wants, well, just a denture on 2 to snap down. If you're in Australia, just 1. And then all the way up to the all on 4, 25,000, which to compete against the clear choices, they keep the number soft under 20 at like 19,999. And that model, I can't tell you the specific numbers because dentists like Chip Castine out in Bakersfield, California will get really mad if I say that he passed the $10 million a year mark with that. Anytime I see implant guy doing 4 to 10 to 12 million in a single office, it's because the foundation was a denture. That's the biggest base. And then the upgrades to your prettier teeth, on 2, on 4, all the way to the top. You got to build a great pyramid, and it starts with a dentate. You know, there's the tooth fairy who takes the children's tooth, and then there's the non-tooth fairy, and that's the bottom of the implant pyramid where you have to start and focus.
Yeah, and you're describing a good, better, best type of scenario for a removable. So you can have a really quality denture, great fit, at say a good version, then you can have a better and then a best version. I think as we see the technology evolve, you're going to see offices re-engage with removable because it's an opportunity they've probably walked away from. You know, whether it's difficult, I don't want to do it, it's too much scheduling, there's too many remakes, I just don't want to deal with it. I'm going to send all that out to look at it and go, I can do this, and I can create great aesthetics with it with my lab, and I know it's going to be great fit. And I can move somebody from, hey, provide a good service to a better to a very good service, and really provide a tiered model for that.
You know what? Being a guy, you know what? The only thing that excites me about cosmetics and cosmetic dentistry that really gets me excited is because I lived through, graduating in '87, I lived through Omni International in Arkansas, finding out that carbamide peroxide 10% thixotropic whitened teeth. And what I noticed is that with humans, you're either all in or you're all out. Like in Arizona, you know, we got 4 lakes up there. We got, I remember Scarce, Saguaro, Cactus, Apache, Roosevelt. You either haven't been there one time or you have a boat and you go there every week. It's like bowling. It's like you haven't bowled one time in 10 years, or you own your own bowling ball, you're in a league. And when they start doing the littlest bit of cosmetic dentistry, the patient would become aware of their teeth, and then they start looking at their teeth, and it takes that would get the mind share. And now they're into their teeth, and they're getting 6-month cleanings, and they're brushing and flowing. So it's kind of like, I don't ever look at my teeth. I don't even care. To wow, I'm gonna get into my teeth.
Sure.
And I think the whole cosmetic thing, you just need this little kid standing in front of a mirror to get introduced and fall in love with his own mouth. And if he does that, his disease will plummet. And that's the fastest way to get him to care, is if they look in the mirror and like what they see.
Yeah, whatever you think about, right, you focus on. It's human nature. So if you don't care about what your teeth looks like in your smile necessarily, it's not good or bad. It's more, you're not aware of it, you're not going to be focused on it. And then when you are, to your point, I become aware of it, I become really probably hyper-focused on it. And that has a lot of ancillary benefits to overall health, which I think we look at it sometimes almost as, or it gets phrased cosmetic as, well, it's cosmetic, it doesn't really matter. It's more than that. There's a cosmetic element of it, but it's also your overall health. So much of it's tied to your healthier mouth that it becomes extremely relevant for your overall health as an individual. So I think sometimes we all pigeonhole things, or we pigeonhole things in an industry or other things about, well, it's just for show. It's really not. I mean, you can make that argument about physical fitness in general. You know, so I'm working out because I want to look good, and when I go to the pool, okay, that's one way to look at it. The other way is I want to build overall strength, cardiovascular health. I want to have good mobility as I get older through life and be able to play with my kids and grandkids. Like, that's real life application of something you may think is cosmetic in terms of how you look with your shirt
And then
off.
you would have built a really successful office, so someday you have enough money like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates to be able to afford a divorce and start all over again. I think we should. What are you most excited about? Let's go inside and see all the exciting
Sure thing.
toys you
Sounds
have
great.
inside your bus.
Absolutely.
All right, welcome to the Dental Innovation Tour. So what I'm going to do, my name is Don Bell, Vice President of Product Marketing for Ivoclar Vivadent. I'm going to walk you through kind of a brief tour about what's inside the vehicle. We're going to start on our laboratory side of our business. And I'll say from a general workflow perspective, we're going from scanning to design software and tools and technology into production. So we're going to touch a little bit on 3D printing as well as milling and what products we can produce with our technology. So while it seems very equipment heavy, the outcome is really what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on what you can produce that can impact and benefit your laboratory and ultimately your end customers, the dentists and the patients. So let's start here. We are taking back on as a partner 3Shape Lab Scanners. So that's new for us. We had kind of walked away from that business a few years ago. And it was really a combination of a variety of factors that led us to that conclusion. But in the end, we thought, okay, we've added new technology like printing and expanded our mill portfolio and felt like our relationship with 3Shape was very good still. We develop a lot of things in conjunction together. We're going to resell their scanner. And we really partner with them on several areas. CAM software and design software is really merged together. We're collaboratively really integrate our technology and our software really well. So taking an STL file or scanning a dentist lab or a laboratory scanner and then sending into our CAM software to design is very simple and seamless. It just works. So us as a reseller, our idea is that we want to be able to provide a complete solution to a laboratory. So let's say your laboratory comes in, I want to mill a denture system as an example. We can provide you everywhere from the front end scan to the CAM software that connects to our mill and then the materials to produce. That's going to give you a predictable outcome because you're going to know, everything's going to work. It's all going to work together. It's going to be very seamless. So we start on the front end with the scanner partnership. So we go from the, let's say, capturing data standpoint, and then this kind of segues on this side of the vehicle is really our production side of technology. So there's a printer in this corner here, which is our new PrograPrint. And the PrograPrint design is, we've done printing a little bit different in terms of how we put together a system. So we 3D print selected materials, but we've also packaged a cleaning system and a curing system as part of one complete package. And in general, curing systems to date have been a real mix of, I've got a printing device, I pour resin into a reservoir, I 3D print materials, I've got to try to clean it up. It's not maybe necessarily very neat or organized. This is a way to really manage materials a little bit more effectively and efficiently. And it also allows you that as you're building materials, because you have to go through and print and then clean and cure all the materials. So in this case, we're looking at wax models that we've done. And once it leaves the print device, it actually goes into a clean system and then into the curing device for final cleanup. So you can actually manage all your restorations or all your output on one singular device, kind of like a holder to go through the printing process. And for laboratories, I think especially where they're looking at what they want to produce, we do wax, splints, and models on our device right now, and we'll expand that with other materials as we go. It allows you to have a system that really functions as a really professional system that's neat, that's organized, and not wasting material. And it's going to produce a high quality output that's highly accurate. And this will evolve. I feel like this evolves every 6 weeks. Like the printing has gotten faster, it's gotten more accurate, it's gotten bigger. The materials are evolving quickly. So it's a really interesting category that we're in. So let's say we'll move over from printing over to milling technology. So we have 4 mills in our network right now, or our system portfolio. The dry mill, which is new for us, we're releasing this month actually as part of the tour. It's, as you can see, it's very small, compact unit. It mills materials dry. So it mills zirconia, PMMA. And then we also have a 3, a 5, and a PM7, a Program Mill 7, which really increase in capacity. So some have changers to hold multiple discs. Some are a little bit faster, like the PM7 is our flagship. It's built in. It's the fastest motors and spindles that we have as far as speed. It also has an 8-disc changer. It also allows you to mill virtually any material and an ionizer to mill PMMA and not have PMMA particles stuck all over the inside of the mill itself. So the technology allows us to take materials, and I get back to the material topic. It really comes about materials, right? So at the end of any process is, what am I placing? We released Prime a couple years ago in Chicago in 2019. For us, it was new technology in terms of taking powders that existed in terms of zirconia powders, mixing different categories of zirconia in a unique way to create aesthetics that look like layered ceramic. And I think there are a lot of good zirconias on the market. Prime allows you through gradient technology to produce a real natural transition. And it's a beautiful restoration. In many cases, we mill, polish, maybe glaze, and the final restoration is finished with no layering, no additional staining and glazing because the transition is so aesthetic. So it really meets, we talk about the EMAX criteria for aesthetics. That's really it. We want to have beautiful aesthetics and layering technology. That's what Prime really offers. And then on the Ivotion, we talked a little bit about this earlier. We're milling dentures right now out of pucks with no teeth anymore, no more carded teeth. And it's, you think about stuff that kind of surprises me in this category. I'm blown away by this every day, that we're no longer creating acrylic bases and sticking in teeth one at a time. We're actually milling a full arch restoration of a denture that can come out as aesthetic and as beautiful as this with immaculate fits. Very snug, very tight fits with very minimal adjustments or hot spots. And the aesthetics, again, are spectacular. So welcome to the clinical side of the vehicle. So what we're going to touch on is we're going to start with clinical workflow. And what's the purpose? We're trying to really illustrate, we were talking about same-day dentistry early and what's new from Ivoclar Vivadent. We showed this mill at a previous IDS several years ago, really worked to refine it, streamline it, make it more predictable. And now came to market last year, really in January of 2020. So we had a big kickoff in Yankee. I almost forget the names of the shows now. So we started Yankee, went to Chicago, and then everything stopped. And what we've been able to do now as we go kind of back in the field is really show and display what the workflow looks like. So this is one of our collaborative partnerships I mentioned earlier with 3Shape. 3Shape is our front end partner, and we have a joint development program with 3Shape on this workflow for dentists, which basically means their Trios Design Studio talks to our CAM software in our mill. So it functions like a complete CAD/CAM system. There's no importing or exporting files. I scan, I design my case, I send it to the actual iPad itself. That's the controller for the mill, and then it produces a crown. So it'll work just like a competitive full CAD/CAM system. And we like that workflow because it's very predictable for the office. I know that I learn Trios, I scan, design, and mill, and I get a predictable outcome that's great aesthetics, great surface finish, really nice marginal integrity. So this came out earlier this year. It's a small system. It's a 5-axis milling system. And as it starts to produce right now, what you're going to see is the actual block moves around the burr. It's a little bit unique in terms of the actual design. That allows us to stay in constant contact with the material to get really nice surface finish and margins. And it create, we think, a little bit better accuracy in the overall restoration and a better product overall. So it's a unique design. You can see from the size, it's very small. So we're talking about, 1.5 feet, 2 feet high, maybe. It weighs about 90 pounds. It's completely self-contained. Compressors inside, a reservoir for the cutting liquid is inside as well, and along with all the automation inside the top of the unit. So it allows you to pick blocks, feed it into the mill itself, mill out the restoration, swap out tools. The machine is somewhat like having an assistant with you. Helps you fill the blocks in, fill the cases in, schedule your case, and replace tools as needed. And then from that point, you can see these are some of the restorations that were milled on the device itself. We would transfer those restorations onto a tray, fire them in our CS2, and it produces a really beautiful aesthetic restoration. And EMAX, as we noted earlier, for us, flagship material for us for chairside applications, represents a little over 70% of all milled restorations in office in a chairside milling system, whether it be CEREC or Plan Mill or our system. The overall market is still predominantly EMAX. So this is our digital workflow. We're excited about where this is going. We've had great presentations on the first 4 stops. Again, this was getting it into the marketplace last year was difficult. We did a lot of virtual programs. It's not the same, right? I can scan and send, mill out a restoration, see the final restoration in person. And we've had dealer partners in here to see it. And I think it's exciting. You get a chance to see how well it works, how fast it is, and what it can produce. And then on the other side, we've got kind of and Priscilla really alluded to the fact that our direct restorative systems that we offer. So we have an entire complete section for direct restoratives because we discussed this earlier about how efficient can we be for the bread and butter direct restorative type dentistry. So we have a 3-second power cure system, which is really our composite with our featured curing light. We also focus on Tetric Prime, which is a new direct restorative from us, which is not a bulk fill product, but it provides some other benefits to the application. So Tetric Prime is a layered type product, but what we've seen in it in certain shades, the trans shade especially, we can bulk fill the trans shade, and it really blends exceptionally well, almost like a universal shade. So I can actually do with that type of material and finish it and get a beautiful blend, really great aesthetics. It also matches our ceramic very well. So Tetric Prime has been unique for us that we did a lot of comparisons of composites and tried to come to as close a match or shade compatible as possible. Tetric Prime for us comes as close as we have to matching or being shade compatible with Emax. And Emax is used so prevalently in the marketplace that if you have a patient that has an Emax crown and I'm putting a direct restorative next to it, I'm going to get a pretty good match or shade compatibility is what we call it with Tetric Prime versus any other material. So that's really become, it's a unique story for us, but it's so prevalent about what's next to it. And you probably have this conversation like, I want to match, I'm going to do a restoration. What's next to it is probably the first question. If it's a PFM, or if it's zirconia, or if it's a glass restoration like Emax, what's next to it? Because that's really as much as the tooth, it's what I'm matching to that becomes critical.
Well, hey, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and visiting us on the tour. We hope to see everybody soon on the Digital Innovations Tour. We're stopping at another 36 cities after this one. So
Next one's San Diego.
Next one's San Diego. And we're going to cover between now and December, roughly December 15th through the US. So we're in Canada. So we're excited about the rest of the tour, and check us out at dentalinnovation.com for a full calendar of where we're going to stop, and hope to see you soon.